Hello and welcome back. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025, and we are reading chapter 26 of Abhorsen by Garth Nix today. And I did it again. I started talking at the beginning of the video, and thankfully I didn't have the camera recording because I promised you guys yesterday that I wouldn't ramble at the beginning of the videos and I would get straight to the chapter. So I will wait until the end to say again what I started to say today. But yeah, let's get right into this chapter. Chapter 26, Sam and the Shadow Hands. As the dead broke free of Sereneth's hold, Sam blew on the Rana pipe. But the soft lullaby was too late, and Sam's breath too hasty. Only a half-dozen of the dead lay down to sleep under Rana's spell, and the bell caught several soldiers too. The other 90 or more dead hands charged down out of the fog, to be met by swords, bayonets, silver blades, and the white lightning of the charter mages. For a furious, frenzied minute of hacking and dodging, Sam couldn't see what was happening. Then the hand in front of him collapsed, its legs cut away. Sam was surprised to see that he'd done that himself, the charter marks on his sword blazing with blue-white fury. "Try the pipes again!" shouted the major. He stepped in front of Sam to engage the next broken-jawed apparition. "We'll cover you!" Sam nodded and brought the pipes to his lips again with new determination. The dead had driven the defenders back with their charge, and now Lirael was only a few feet behind him, a frozen statue who would be totally vulnerable to attack. Most of the dead hands were fresh corpses, still clad in their workers' overalls, but many were inhabited by spirits that had lain long in death, who quickly transformed the dead flesh they now occupied, making it less human and more like the dreadful shapes they'd assumed in death. One came at Sam now, wriggling like a snake between Major Green and Lieutenant Tyndall, its lower jaw unhinged for a larger bite. Reflexively, Sam stabbed it through the throat. Sparks flew as the charter marks on the blade destroyed dead flesh. It wriggled and threshed, but couldn't free itself from the sword, so the thing's spirit began to crawl out of its fleshy husk, like a worm of darkness, leaving a totally rotten apple. Sam looked down at it, and felt his fear replaced by a hot anger. How dare these dead intrude upon the world of life? His nostrils flared, and his face reddened, and he drew breath to blow upon the pipe. This was not the dead's path, and he would make them choose another. Lungs expanded to the full, he chose the kibbuth pipe, and blew. A single note sounded, high and clear, but then it somehow became a lively, infectious jig. It cheered the soldiers and even made them smile, their weapons moving with the rhythm of kibbuth's song. But the dead heard a different tune, and those with working mouths and lungs and throats let out terrible howls of fear and anguish. But howl as they would, they couldn't drown out kibbuth's call, and the dead spirits began to move against their will, thrust out of the decaying flesh they occupied, and back into death. "That's shown them!" shouted Lieutenant Tyndall, as the dead hands fell all along the line, leaving empty corpses, the guiding spirits driven back into death by kibbuth. "Don't get too excited," growled the major. He looked swiftly around and saw several men on the ground, clearly dead or dying. There were many wounded headed back to the aid post set up at the base of the spur, some of them supported by far too many able-bodied companions. Considerably more men were simply fleeing down the hill, back towards the Sutherlings and the relative protection of the stream. Most of the company had fled, in fact, and Green felt a pang of disappointment in what he knew would be his last command. But the great majority of the men were conscripts, and even those who had served on the perimeter for a while would never have seen so many dead. "Damn them! Just when we're winning! The fools!" Lieutenant Tyndall had noticed the fleeing men at last, with all the indignation of his youth. He made as if to start after them, but Major Green held him back. "Let them go, Francis. They are not the scouts, and this is too much for them. And we need you here. That was probably only the first wave. There will be more." "Yes, and soon," confirmed Sam hurriedly. "Major, we need to bring everyone in closer to Lirael. I'm afraid if even one dead creature gets past—" "Yes," agreed the major fervently. "Francis, Edward,
Close up, everyone, quick as you can. See what you can do for the wounded, too. But I don't want to lose any more effectives. Go!" "Yes, sir," the two lieutenants snapped in unison. Then they were shouting orders, and the sergeants were relaying them with extra flavor. There were only 30 or so soldiers left, and within a minute they were almost shoulder to shoulder in a tight ring around Lirael's iced-over form. "How many more of the dead are coming?" asked the major, as Sam stared up into the fog. It was still spreading and growing thicker, wisps winding around them as it rolled downhill. There was more lightning beyond the ridge, too, and the storm clouds had spread across the sky like a great inky stain, in parallel with the white fog below. "I'm not sure," Sam frowned. "More and more of them keep emerging into life. Hedge must be in death himself and is sending them out. He has to have found an old graveyard or some other supply of bodies, because they're all dead hands so far. Timothy said he only had 60 workers, and they were all in the first attack." Both glanced over at Tim Wallach as Sam spoke. He had taken a dead soldier's rifle, sword bayonet, and helmet, and now stood in the ring, much to everyone's surprise, perhaps including his own. "It's always better to be doing," said Sam, quoting the disreputable dog. As he said it, he realized that he actually believed it now. He was still scared, still felt the knot of apprehension in his guts, but he knew it wouldn't stop him from doing what had to be done. It was what his parents would expect, Sam thought, but he did not dwell on that. He could not think of Sabriel and Touchstone, or he would fall apart. And he could not, must not do that. "My philosophy exactly," the major began to say. Then he saw Sam shiver and reach for his panpipes. "Shadow hands!" Sam exclaimed, pointing with his sword as he put the pipes to his lips. "Stand ready!" roared the major, reaching into the charter for marks of fire and destruction, though he knew they would be of little use against shadow hands. They had no bodies to burn or flesh to break. The charter magic the soldiers knew might slow them, but that was all. Up on the ridge, 4 vaguely human shapes of utter darkness came down through the fog, rippling across rock and thorn. Silent as the grave, they ignored the arrows that passed straight through them and glided inexorably forward, directly towards Lirael, in the gap between the boulders where Sam, Major Green, and Lieutenant Tyndall stood to bar their way. When they were only 20 yards away, one shadow hand paused and pounced upon a wounded soldier who'd been overlooked, lying under the overhang of a large rock. Frantically, he tried to stand and get away, but the shadow hand wrapped all around him like a shroud and sucked his life away. As the soldier's dying scream gurgled into nothing, Sam took a breath and blew desperately on the Sareneth pipe. He had to dominate the shadow hands, bend them to his will, for he and his allies had no other weapons that would work. His sword and the marks it bore would hurt them, but no more. So he blew, and prayed to the charter that he would have the strength to overcome the shadow hands. Sareneth's strong voice cut through even the thunder. Immediately, Sam felt the shadow hands resist his dominion. They raged against his will, and sweat broke out all over his body from the effort. It was all he could do just to stop them in place. These spirits were old, and much stronger than the dead hands Sam had sent walking into death with Kibbeth. It took all his strength to stop them moving forward, as they constantly pushed against the bonds Sareneth had, oh so lightly, woven around them. Slowly, the world narrowed for Sam, till all he could sense was the 4 spirits and their struggle against him. Everything else was gone. The dampness of the fog, the soldiers around him, the thunder and lightning. There was only him and his opponents. "Bow down to me!" he shouted. But it was with his mind and will, not a shout any human ears could hear. Sam heard the voiceless spirits answer back the same way, a chorus of mental howls and hissing that clearly defied him. They were clever, these shadow hands. One would pretend to falter, but as Sam concentrated his will against that one, the others would counterattack, almost breaking his hold. Gradually, Sam became aware that they were not only resisting him, they were actually eroding the binding. Every time he shifted his concentration, they would shuffle forward a little,
Just a few steps, but gradually the gap was closing. Soon they would be able to leap past him, drain the life from the soldiers at his side, and attack the defenseless body of Lirael. He also became aware that only a few seconds had actually passed since he had started blowing through the Sereneth pipe, and he had yet to take another breath. Though the sound of the pipe continued, it was weakening. If only he could pause, refill his lungs, and sound Sereneth again, he could greatly strengthen the binding. Sam knew he was close to total command of these spirits, yet not close enough. He also knew that if he shifted his full concentration away from the 4 shadow hands to take a breath, they would be upon him. Given that, all he could do was continue the battle of wills and try to slow them down even more. Lirael could return at any moment and banish them with the bells. Sam just had to hold them for long enough. He stopped even trying to take a breath, shunting his body's urgent demands for air into the corner of his mind. Nothing was as important as stopping the shadow hands. He would concentrate every last particle of his mind and power upon them, and every last wisp of air into the pipe. They would not reach Lirael. They must not. She was the last hope for the entire world against the destroyer. Besides, she was his blood kin, and he had promised. The shadow hands took another step closer, and Sam's entire body shuddered with effort as he tried to force them back, his muscles reflecting the struggle of his mind. But he was growing weaker, he knew, and the dead stronger. He was also close to passing out from lack of breath, and an almost overpowering urge to step back was rising inside him. "Get out of the way! Take a breath! Let the monsters pass!" But as he fought the dead, he fought his own fears, pushing them away into the same distant corner of his mind that so badly wanted to draw air into his lungs. They would stay there, and he was determined to fight well beyond his last breath. At the same time, he tried desperately to think of some stratagem or cunning ploy. Nothing came to him, and though he hadn't seen or felt them move, the shadow hands had stolen some ground. They were now only just out of sword's reach, tall columns of inky blackness, spreading a chill colder than the coldest of winter days. The 2 on the outside were moving around him, Sam realized, though not by much. Clearly they intended to surround and smother him with their shadow stuff, to wrap him in a cocoon of 4 hungry spirits. Then they would move on to Lirael. Fire suddenly burst out around the head of the closest shadow hand, a fist-sized globe of pure blue flame. But the dead creature didn't so much as flinch, and the fire spluttered out into the individual marks that had made it, and these vanished into the fog. Another charter spell struck, to no effect, save to set one of the stunted trees alight as the fire rebounded off the shadowy form of the dead. Sam realized that Major Green and Lieutenant Tyndall were trying to help him with these spells, but he could spare neither thought nor breath to warn them of the uselessness of fire against such an enemy. All Sam's attention was on the dead. In turn, all their attention was focused back on him and on the struggle between them. So neither noticed the fog suddenly swirl around them, as if disturbed by some mighty gust of air, nor the shouts and cries of the soldiers behind them. That is, till they heard the bell. A strong, ferocious chime that fell from the air above them. It gripped the 4 shadow hands like a puppet master, picking up marionettes to put back in the box. Unable to resist, they bent down, their shadowy heads raised to beg wordlessly for mercy. No mercy was forthcoming. Another bell rang, building an angry, violent dance over the broad shout of the first. The shadow hands jerked upright at its sharp song, their shadow stuff stretching into thin lines, as if they were being sucked through a narrow hole. Then they were gone, summarily executed, this time for good. Sam fell to his knees as the dead disappeared, and drew a long, shuddering breath into his desperate lungs. Above him, a bright blue and silver paper wing hovered for a moment, like a giant hawk over its prey. Then it fell quickly and circled down to the valley floor, where the ground was level and clear enough to land. Sam stared at it, and at the other 2 paper wings that were gliding down in front of the Sutherlings. 3 paper wings. The craft that had passed overhead was blue and silver,
and that was the Abhorsen's color. The second was of green and silver, for the Clare. The third was the red and gold of the royal line. 2 of the 3 paper wings had a passenger, as well as a pilot. "I don't understand," whispered Sam. "Who wields the bells?" Mogget was just short of the top of the ridge, zigzagging between dead hands and lightning rods, when he heard the bells. He smiled and paused to shout at the single dead hand who stood in his way. "Hear the full voice of Sereneth! Flee while you still can!" As a ploy, it didn't work. The dead hand was too newly returned to life, too stupid to understand Mogget's words, and it didn't have Mogget's unnaturally keen hearing. It hadn't heard the bells through the thunder, and it had no sense of the power unleashed beyond the ridge. As far as it was concerned, living prey had just stopped in front of it, close enough to grab. Rotting fingers leapt out, clutching the little albino's leg. Mogget yowled and kicked back, the dry bones of his captor snapping with the force of the blow. But still it hung on, and other dead were lumbering towards Mogget now, drawn by the prospect of life to feast on. Mogget yowled again and put Nick down. Then he whipped around, his long-nailed fingers scratching and his sharp-toothed mouth fastening on the dead hand's wrist. If it still had human intelligence, the hand would have been surprised, because no man ever fought like this one, with an arched back and a wild combination of hissing, biting, and scratching. Mogget bit through the dead creature's wrist, severing it completely. Instantly he sprang back, picked up Nick, dodged around the hand, and sprinted off with a triumphant yowl. The creature ignored its missing hand and tried to follow them. Only then did it discover that its strange opponent had clawed through its hamstrings as well. It took 2 uncertain steps and fell, the dead spirit that inhabited it already looking desperately around for some other body to inhabit. By then, Mogget was on the other side of the ridge. He held Nick's arm out to one side as he ran, keeping it well away from his own body. That arm shook and shivered, muscles twitched under the skin, and dark bruises blossomed all around the elbow and forearm. Behind Mogget, the lightning storm began to abate, and the thunder to lessen. The fog was still lit with electric blue around the edges, but at the center, both the fog and the storm clouds above it had become a bright, bright red. And that is the end of chapter 26. So I hope you enjoyed that reading. It was fun to read. I just want to say, now that the chapter is over, I hope that if you've been putting something off, or if there's something small that you can do today to further you towards your goals, I hope you can do it. I make videos on here every once in a while, and I say the same thing all the time. Like, just do it. Just do that thing you've been putting off. Do something, even if it's picking some trash up off the floor or washing a few dishes. Who cares if you've got a sink full of dishes? Just try to wash a few. Or if you need to clean your bathroom, can you pick something up or just maybe wipe the mirror off? Or I don't know. I don't know what you've been putting off, or if you've been putting off anything at all. Maybe you're a responsible adult. Maybe you have, maybe it's not taken you as long as it's taken me to buckle down and do the things you need to do in life. But if you're struggling, because we all struggle sometimes, I hope that you can do a little something today to get you a little further ahead and make you not feel so behind. Because sometimes that happens to me. I have days where I just can't do anything else. And I've had many, many days where I couldn't do anything at all. Getting up and going to the bathroom and flushing the toilet was, as much as I could do. I had to go lay back down because my brain just wouldn't let me do anything else. And thank God I'm not like that anymore. But I know what it's like to feel like that. I know what it's like to not have the strength to do much more than just exist. So I hope that today
And forgive me if you have PDA or pathological demand avoidance and my efforts are immediately thwarted because you have a brain like me that when you hear somebody tell you to do something, it says, fuck you, I'm not doing that. So if you're like that, I would ask you to take some baby steps. And I don't mean that to be patronizing. Sometimes that's all you can do. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is just take baby steps. I used to have a friend, I won't call him a friend anymore, I love myself too much for that, but he taught me about titrating, which is just a fancy word for taking baby steps. You just do a little something, even if it's just a minutia of a task, to make it easier for you tomorrow. And sometimes it's just like, can you empty a small trash can into a bigger trash can? Can you pick up some Kleenex off the floor that, maybe you've been shooting shots into the trash can and missing? Can you pick them up off the floor and put them in the trash can? Can you organize a little bit of laundry? Maybe you have done your laundry, but it's piled up in a chair or on the bed and you've just been like scooting it over because you just can't fold it. Can you get some socks together and shove them in the drawer? Can you hang up one shirt? I guess that's it. I'm just, if no one else encourages you today, and you don't have anybody else to tell you that you can do it, I want to tell you that you can do it. You can do something, and you can do anything that your mind tells you that it can't. You can do it. That's all. I hope you try. Yeah. I don't even remember what all I said, but that is my ramble for today. And I love you so much, and I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting so hard for you because I know what it's like to be that tired. And I still have trouble with things. There's all kinds of shit around here that I haven't done, but I take those baby steps now, and they make me really happy. And damn whatever someone else will think. You just gotta do what makes you feel good, because you're the only one that has to live in your body. And please try, even if it's a little bit. That's it. I'm going to go edit this video and maybe take out that whole ramble I just did. I don't know what it's gonna even sound like, but anyways, I'm rooting for you. I love you. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow night. And as always, may your magic manifest. Bye.